Micaiah Stevens. This is Hamlet development log number 4. I work for a company called Haven Studios. You can leave a comment or, yeah. So let's talk about status report because it's so exciting. This kind of looks like the last status report. But yeah, so we're still on the 0.8 on the live branch, 0.08. And then we've got the 0.10 on the beta branch. We pushed out last week we talked about the 0.11 branch that we're working on. We did quite a bit of changes with that. I guess we'll have some more exciting changes for that to carry forward. Then we have a few things to show off. So here we are. So on the 24th of February, last month, we talked about the devlog of 3. It was sort of that same sort of, I think we worked more on it. This is kind of Monday morning. We worked on that Sunday night. So quite a bit different. So here we are, Monday morning on March the 4th. Morning for me. Everybody else is probably asleep. Anyways, so this should hit the YouTube as soon as I'm done with it, once I've verified. So we've got, talked about the status, talked about the Steam, kind of where it's at. We've got a few topics, have it coming soon, which is kind of weird, and then libraries, and then goal. So, some of these in develop, this is definitely the sort of cutting edge of in development, not promised. We've been working on this for quite a while, talking about it for quite a while, so probably maybe time to lift the veil on some of this and showcase, which is also kind of coming soon and still quite not there yet. So, I guess that's, oh yeah, so let's, I guess we could have removed that slide, but anyways, this is kind of garish screen is the libraries. We've, all these folders kind of represent the libraries we've been working on for a while. The Haven, right down here, Haven 1.14 is the main sort of library of game files. But then we have this new libraries, version 0.1. One of the problems with the Haven main library was it was just all-inclusive of all the game projects, so anytime there was a thing, it would just be huge. Shouldn't cough. Sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, so it's kind of the Haven library just became this massive, includes just tons and tons of libraries. So we decided to split it off into, we now have this called this base library, and then which is the sort of the base libraries included stuff like the int3 vectors, which are just a vector that's just for ints, and various sort of core library functions that are just color. I believe colors and materials actually are part of the game library, which is part of the Unity's. Is if the game library for Unity is anything that has to do with Unity's materials and colors and various Unity-specific objects, singletons, receivers, and MonoBehaviours and stuff like that. And then Haven People is a kind of a long-term project that's been sort of brewing for a while. Basically talking about quantifying characters as humanoid characters. In this sense, it doesn't really mean human versus dwarf, but sort of humanoid in the fact that they have a first name, last name, date of birth, where they live, various sort of genealogical data as well. So it's all kind of included in that, and decided to spread that out. And we have, just going down the list here, Haven AI is just a sort of a generic. It includes the characters, player data, just a ton of various things. A lot of it, the pathers are sort of stuck in here. Just a ton of AI. I think pathfinding was probably still part of the Haven 1.14. Anyways, and then the critters are sort of any creature could be part of the AI, but it's sort of meant to be a part of the forest system, but they're split apart. And then we've got the actual Haven Hamlet 1.12. You can see there of that's the full project files and everything. And then we've got the Haven Kingdom, which is an umbrella for a project we were working on quite a while, but then that includes stuff like inventory, characters, a lot of stuff like that. Haven Map Nodes is I believe it's a separate sort of project. It's sort of talking about the idea of maps, and this is just one of the iterations. I'm not sure if it's the entirety of the map nodes. I think it actually is the encompassing, but yeah, so Continuing on, you can sort of see the Haven Studios logos. These are all the new logos of the Hamlet from above. Haven Towns is a sort of test project. It's been worked on for quite a while. Then we got back to the Haven 1.14 script, and then this is um, yeah, and then you got the looter scripts, which is actually part of Project Inventory. We've been talking a little bit about a lot of those test projects made in. I think one of the things that's safe to say about the looters is the game design talks a little bit about, but the good idea would be sort of testing out combat mechanics in a automated session, so we can run 10,000 combats and say, this leveling system is good and various stuff like that. And then we've got Rogue Hoose, which is sort of the adventure mode primary core, and then of course TechSmash Pro. Anyway, so some of the boring stuff to show. Sort of boring in the fact that we're still, I think this is the .12 version, but we haven't sort of updated the file. Anyway, so just to show off the adventure mode a little bit, this is kind of that rogue house idea. You can see Bob Wood. We did actually change all the characters' names. There was using a sort of a people file, and we decided to change it up to various. I don't think. Yeah. I guess I was just talking about this guy recently with this NPC character. But the other thing I forgot to mention is if you look on the top left, it says no unit. That sort of means he wasn't created with a unit in mind, such as Bob Wood here was created with a unit in mind. Anyway, so we're showing off the adventure mode. It sort of hasn't been changed. It's the fact that it works is really amazing. Do we have an axe? Yeah, so we can actually walk up, smack trees, do everything we could do. There's still quite a bit of clipping issues, but Project Inventory is now completely integrated into this project. Well, I mean, it's sort of the start of the idea. And the question is, well, why are we showing you this? Well, part of it is because we wanted to show you this highly untested, very similar. I think we have to unpause it, but it's the same sort of concept. One of the things that's sort of, I thought I couldn't back up. Anyways, one of the things you can sort of see is the camera. Is there a good way to sort of showcase this somehow? Camera feels like it's pulled back, it's pulled down a little bit. You get a little bit more of the central view, and it feels like you're sort of, playing as the character. Again, this is one of those the major changes here is like you can use left and right as we're talking about here, but over here your character is sort of limited in that example that you can rotate just as this here, and then the rotation's a little bit better. It's not sort of instant, but I think sort of and then you can sort of see these. I believe it's a tiled. Yeah, these are tiles, which are sort of different. These are sort of grass tiles with but these are a little bit different. And you can sort of see this. The dark green is actually a prefab sort of instance, and then we have the house. The house is here for sort of indications of the size. When to get the character size and the correct dimensions and stuff like that, and mess with this. One of the other things to do is if you hold shift, this is kind of our first iteration of a combat sort of idea. Where you hold shift, and he actually charges forward. I believe if you actually how to send a signal. If I charge forward, he doesn't charge more. He stops. Oh, I guess there's not a wall there because of how the this is just definitely temporary. Anyway, so one of the big things about this is that we have this upper world that's sort of similar, but then as soon as you step on this tile here, it goes into this dungeon view, and we've showcased this a little bit. This is definitely a pretty massive work in progress. We haven't actually included it into the primary system. You can see there's quite a few things like this tile here. Oh, yep, sorry. Come on. Oh. There we go. It's quite a few, and I think the camera clipping is still a pretty massive problem here, but we have workarounds for that. You can also sort of see how to best showcase this. If you look at the graphics view, yeah, you can sort of see that there's These things should be going away. Like these are excellent here, and then you can sort of get a good look of the. Here's the main dungeon room, and there's quite a few rooms under there. Oops, which is all pretty awesome. Anyways, and then you can climb back out of the dungeon. There's quite a few, crooks, nooks, and crannies and stuff like that. Yeah, and then I believe if I, yeah, this should look like a completely different dungeon if I have done not too different, but anyway, so that's a general take on this. Whew. So it is. This is kind of the a good look at the early look of sort of some changes we're looking at making. You can see sort of the core themes are sort of similar. One thing that's sort of not working is the fact that you can't look at this from a, from a RTS sort of view where I can't just click this guy and tell him to go here, because that's all. It sort of should be working pretty similar, but it's going to take quite a bit of work to get that in place. And I think, yeah, these are different dungeons each time is how it should render. Anyways, but so you can sort of a lot of it's just sort of timing and feeling like, this feels. I think it's pretty chunky right now because it just, because it's not that it, because you're sort of moving, and he's not sort of progressing to that tile. He's just sort of walking forward, and he's not like the cameras actually feel a little bit better where they actually feel like they rotate around versus this sort of look is like shuts the camera, which is not really great. And then this is sort of gets that same look, but it seems like, and that's sort of it. Is like the smoothness of how fast you can run around the world, and interact with that world is sort of going to be the highlights of the next little while. I think it's just sort of it's kind of a personal sort of feeling. This one feels like it's much more roguelike, but then it's like not very it kind of feels chunky, and it needs to be. I think the graphics are a little bit better, although you can sort of there's some sort of edge cases here where it's like this is sort of part of the world where you'd maybe see the ocean, but then the ocean would sort of go out to, you can sort of if we get this sort of here, you can sort of see that in this the take of this on the adventure mode. It's like you could well, actually I guess the sandbox would feel a lot better to sort of showcase the fact that, that the this is something we have to solve eventually as well. Is like if you're looking at this camera, different, it's like, when you're here you still get that same black effect, and we haven't really figured out a way to solve that. A lot of games just don't end up solving that. A lot of indies are just sort of, hey, this is the edge of the world, and it's cool, and it works out, and you can still do everything you could before. I think we haven't really adjusted. We've been playing with a little bit, but we haven't sort of finished out. You can still kind of bug the characters pretty hardcore, as right there. I think that's a good example, but that's still a lot of the. What? He should. Oh, maybe he doesn't want to turn. Yeah, you can see all the. Now that we're in the development build here, we can see tons of things going. Okay. Anyway, so hopefully this it's sort of we had a working on a lot of background stuff, so we had wanted something to show off, and hopefully this gives a different take on sort of some of the ideas we could think about. And the primary goal of this project right here is this. This is called the Dungeon Generator, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, Haven Dungeon Generator version 2. So, and then this is sort of, we definitely can see the headroom and, various ways to clean this up and make it better, but it should feel like you're exploring a dungeon, and how that looks and how that feels needs to be sort of adjusted. I think I maybe should find some good examples of dungeons that are sort of. And I think part of the thing too is like a rogue is, it feels like you're moving in a roguelike, um, which will be, I guess, interesting. We'll talk about that in a few seconds. But yeah, it just feels a little sparse, I think, because of the dungeons and their sort of their. But it's trying to get the scale, the scope, and the sort of the idea of these dungeons. And we're not too like extremely worried about you know. Um, I think one of the comments we were I think we got, yeah, one of the comments we got were talking about the fact that, oh, our walls are, there's various things and cameras, and I think it's often misunderstood. Like, I'm not worried about this because I sort of have ideas and I've dealt with that before. You can actually see various channels on that. In fact, you can actually, let's see if I can sort of, is there a way to do that? Yes. Was it this guy? Yeah, there we go. Oh, I don't probably need to be. Oh, we'll just go full screen, and it was just kind of you sort of definitely sort of. Anyways, you can sort of see this is this is called the Delaney. I think it was no. Is this the Delaney dungeon? Yeah, which is sort of this idea, which is kind of the sharp accent dungeon. There's a video on this channel, and that's what this project is meant to do: is take all these different ideas. I definitely like this dungeon quite a bit better in terms of the generation of it and stuff like that. But we'll hopefully have to sort of mesh these, all these different dungeon generations and um, ideas together. But you can sort of, these are actually pretty good. Anyway, so that's just a general idea of dungeons, which is kind of, yeah. So you can see here's the, I've been looking at this as my, I think, is there an easy way to show this? Probably not. But anyways, that's my desktop background. So I've been staring at that nonstop and I've been thinking about this sort of core concept of, this doesn't epitomize, I guess we're on the goal topic. It doesn't epitomize the goal of the project. It was sort of just the sort of the idea of the first stage of this project, and somehow it sort of has morphed into this sort of all-encompassing idea, and we sort of haven't sort of thought of the design. I do definitely like the lighting and the wood and a lot of the things and some of the details feel. I'm not sure I'm really a fan of the bricks being popped out like this, but you can sort of see some of that design and some different brick structures like that were sort of put together quickly and not really you know smoothed out, and it feels like more like not a not a temple or a castle or something that where people would take the time to and the money to pay for this sort of. Anyway, so yeah, so it's sort of the Hamlet design log. There's quite a bit of behind the scenes work, so it wasn't very. I mean, this probably represents a week. Well, I mean, it's like I've worked on various different things in this project. Um, people, for instance, I've sort of been working on that quite a bit, and some of the looting um, dungeons, sort of, are the ideas behind a lot of that. Uh, it's just sometimes the main Hamlet work progresses great, and other times it's like it just feels like, hey, I need to sort of work on some of these other projects. But anyway, so the next design log, I'm looking at it, and talking about these roguelikes. Someone asked me, well, what's a roguelike? And it was sort of this idea of that's an interesting concept. And it's like, well, roguelike's permadeath, and oh, but then it was like, well, what is a roguelike? So I think as we're sort of getting more into this roguelike concept and sort of idea here for Hamlet, is sort of one of the core aspects of going around and exploring a dungeon and doing these sort of aspects that we're talking about here. So I thought the next design video would be a really good idea to talk about this idea of the roguelikes, and how does that come about, and sort of the history lesson behind that. I think is sort of the concept, hopefully, that I'm hoping to talk about. So, so yeah. So that's the design number 4. What's the design number 5 going to look like? I'm not quite sure. I think it's sort of going to be some one of the next major goals that I have for, I'm not exactly sure, is to take this dungeon project here, um, the dungeon game. Oh no, it's over here. To take the dungeon game, as I am now, yeah, this dungeon game, and making it into. Does it actually show me a good idea of the templates? It may not. Yeah, it may not show you the templates as a good case for. Anyway, so just to take the dungeon game we have here and the sort of the core concept of, and then putting this project into the main project. So that's been what we've been talking about for quite a while. In the background is talking about this dungeon game, and now I think it's time at some point to take these core files here, and put him back into the dungeon, sort of see if I can replicate that sort of same concept, but a little bit in the sort of the Hamlet style, with sort of this, the trees and the tools and this sort of, and then put it into the interactive of the RTS camera and get that to work. So that's our next goal for the next few weeks. But I'm not sure how long it's going to take. It's quite massive. We dumped the entire project in, and it just came up just way too many errors and way too many core clashing concepts there of everything, and that's I think that's part of the thing about that dungeon. It was sort of encompassed a lot of things it didn't need to, so somehow I need to, and that's sort of why some of this new libraries came about, because it's like I wanted to sort of break apart the Hamlet, the Haven. 1.14 has been around for 10 or 20 years, 10 plus years of code files, and so it's like I need to sort of slim that down and sort of optimize it and get it back to a more reasonable point of view. Anyway, so that's going to be the next design. Hopefully, it'll be out on Wednesday or Thursday. It's going to be talking about roguelike. If it sort of fits the bill, we'll have to see. I'm already feeling a little bit behind, but it's should be a fun concept, and sort of think about these things in terms of talking about the design for Hamlet, which is including that dungeon exploration pillar. I think is maybe a good example people use as the adventure pillar, the dungeon pillar, and then the inventory crafting town pillar. Maybe would be some sort of concept of that. Um, so, anyways, that's the Hamlet design number 4, or Hamlet design. What are we calling these things? Hamlet development log. There we go. Sometimes I was talking to Mr. Sir, Mr. Anchor. He's dead weight at parties, but he's really fun to talk to about because he's a fellow programmer that's working on his own games, and it's really nice to get to talk to him. But we've been talking about this weekly updates, and it's been fresh. It's been awesome, but then it's also kind of feels like some weeks you spend a lot of time working on very boring, uncool things that it's impossible to show off, and it's like so you just. Plus, it's been a couple hard weeks, I think, and with a lot of snow and a lot of things going on, and things happening, and worrying about a lot of things. So it's like, whew. But hopefully, we'll get back at it and sort of we feel like we're making a lot of more progress. Definitely now that I have the sort of the core kingdom in project inventory into the main thing, I think we'll have a lot of cool things to show, which have been demoed on the channel many times. So it's just now just sort of trying to put everything together and sort of having everything talk to each other, which is already feel like a marriage counselor or something. Now I know you're an item, but it's you're an item on the ground, and you need to talk to the character. No, I know you're not a scriptable object, and it just gets crazy and trying to convince everybody to talk to each other and line up, and then too it's like you're sort of there's no set way of how to do things, and so you're like learning as you go, and and you got future concepts of stuff. So, anyways, I guess that's enough rambling for now about the Hamlet development log number 4. I'm Micaiah Stevens. So if you want to leave a comment or let me know, that'd be awesome. You take care. Have a good one.